welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Chris Kidd, he's a regular on The Price of Business. He's a financial coach and really works with everything from celebrities to athletes to everyday people. And I love having him as a regular on the program, been with me for a long time. His website is chriskidd, that's KIDD.com. Chris, as always, glad to have you on the show. You got a really interesting guest for us today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce him, and we'll get right started into our conversation.
Yeah, personally, I was really excited about this one. My guest today is someone who's very big on the NFL, and one team in particular that I'm kind of fond of is the Dallas Cowboys. And he's quite an authority on it. He's a best-selling author. He's got, I believe, 4 other books, but his new book called How About Them Cowboys, Inside the Huddle with the Stars and Legends of America's Team. Gary Myers is my guest today. Good to have you on, Gary.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Gary, why don't you start off with a little bit of background on your story and your connection with the Cowboys, at least you're passionate enough to write about it.
Yeah, Kevin. I covered the Cowboys for the Dallas Morning News from 1981 to 89. So I spanned the 2 years of the end of Tom Landry's years with the Cowboys, and then I was there for the very beginning of the Jerry Jones time when he bought the team in February of 89. I moved back to New York in May of 89, so I wrote all about the transition there and the sale and the firing of Landry and the whole changeover in the Cowboys organization. And although I then worked in New York, working for the New York Daily News, from 1989 through this past April, I still had a great affinity for writing about the Cowboys and stayed in touch with a lot of people that I got to know during my years in Dallas. And I've always wanted to write a book about them. There's been several written about the Cowboys during the Super Bowl years in the early 90s and the mid-90s, and about some of the things that have taken place and about the Landry years. But I just felt the time was right now to write about the Cowboys. A good basis of my book is about how they have branded themselves, how they are the most popular team and the most valuable team in the world, even though they haven't been to a Super Bowl in over 20 years. So I really get into Jerry Jones' business aspect in the book, as well as several other things.
Yeah, so just to mention, we got about 8 minutes left, so I'd like to try to cover a little more territory. Chris, your question?
So, Gary, how did this book come about, and what are some of the things that you talk about in it?
Yeah, I talk about a lot of the financial things surrounding the stadium and the Star, which is a training facility that opened a couple of years ago. But I also get into relationships between Jerry and his 3 children, who are the heirs to the Cowboys team. When Jerry passes or decides he doesn't want to be involved anymore, the team will not be sold. It will stay in the family. And then I get into relationships between Tony Romo and Jason Witten. The Bill Parcells years, the Jimmy Johnson years. Jerry's decision to be the general manager of the team rather than hiring a football guy. So when people ask me what the book is about, I say it's a little of this and a little of that, and it really is. I think I found the things that I found to be most interesting about the Cowboys, both today and in the years gone by, and put it all together.
What is your thought of the Jerry Jones years? You mentioned right at the very beginning, it's been 2 decades since they've been to a Super Bowl. A lot of times coaches were being considered, and they kind of distanced themselves because they didn't want an owner who was also essentially a general manager. Talk about your thoughts, your sizing up of those 2 decades.
I think a case can be made, and I mentioned it in the book, that Jerry's done himself and his team a disservice by continuing to be the general manager. it was one thing for him to have the title when Jimmy Johnson was the coach, because we all knew back then that Jimmy was making all the personnel decisions. But once Jimmy left after the 93 season, Jerry kept the title, but he also took the responsibility of making personnel decisions. And not only is he not a football man in the truest sense, although he did play college football, but he's more of a businessman, and he really needs somebody in there running the football operation who can compete with the true football people around the league. And I think the results are obvious. I mean, the Cowboys' value continues to grow, but they haven't won a Super Bowl in more than 20 years. So there's a direct correlation there.
What do you, Gary, what do you think as far as maybe who they could have as general manager? Because I know personally, as a Cowboys fan, that's the same kind of, I guess, complaint that I hear from everybody is, we need a new general manager. Do you think that one of his sons might be able to fill that spot, or do they need to go outside of the family and go look for a GM who's been in the game for a while, or from another team or something?
His son Stephen, who's the oldest child, is he has the title of personnel director, but Stephen also is not. He's grown up in the game because he's been with the team since he's 25 years old, but he's not a scout. I don't think he is the equal of others sitting there and grading films, and he's more on the business side as well. So, and his son Jerry is strictly on the business side, Jerry Jr. To give you a list of names of who it could be, there's many names I can give you over the last 20 years who we should have hired as general manager, and there'd be a list I can give you now of up and coming stars in the personnel business. But the fact of the matter is that he has absolutely no intention of relinquishing the GM position. So it's not even a question of, okay, does he have a ready list of potential candidates? It's not even a thought that crosses his mind. Will McClay is very influential in the personnel department, and he's a respected man around the league. But the fact is that Jerry has final call. He does defer when he's outvoted in the room, but ultimately the decision belongs to him.
So Fox Sports, The Herd, has called the Cowboys actually the worst team in the NFL for the past 2 decades overall. Do you go that far in your assessment?
No, has he considered the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, I know, but
yeah,
that's true. That's true.
The Cowboys make the playoffs basically every other year. That's how it's worked out since Jimmy is left, and the lack of another Super Bowl trophy since the '95 season is the predominant thought on people's minds. But to say they're the worst team over the last 20 years, that's really a stretch.
Gary, do you have a website that we can refer to get more information about you?
I don't have a website. I just have my Twitter account is at Gary Myers NY. People can follow me that way, but I don't actually have a website.
At Gary Myers NY on Twitter. Great way to engage with you. Okay, Chris, literally a minute left. No time for questions, but a final thoughts on your part.
I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to reading the book, How About Them Cowboys, Inside the Huddle with the Stars and Legends of the team. Gary, great to have you on. Thanks for being with us. Definitely looking forward to reading this.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating too. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I was just going to say that the book is being released on October 9th. It's available to pre-order now, on all the different websites. So I think Cowboy lovers and Cowboys haters will both enjoy the book.
Well, what I like just in the interview is it doesn't sound like you particularly have an axe to grind. I think the Herd on Fox Sports probably did. I think it's just because of expectations. They were such an incredible team for so long. But I like the fact you don't sound like you have an axe to grind, and it sounds like it's going to be very authoritative. So I look forward to reading it, too. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks, Chris Kidd. Chris Kidd, it's Chris, KIDD.com. Check out his information. I'm Kevin Price. We'll be back right after the break, but I got to remind you, doesn't matter day of the week, doesn't matter time of the day, this show continues 24/7 at priceofbusiness.com, where we are continuously adding new content, audio, video, articles, and more. And a lot of people engage directly with us with guest ideas and suggestions, which we love that, on Twitter at Kevin Price Live. So feel free to do that as well. All right, when we come back, just a matter of moments, we'll have much more for you on this nationally syndicated program. You're listening to The Price of Business.